lot of questions about how to store fabric in a sewing lab, and there's really no one way of doing it. It really depends on how you have your students purchase their fabric, whether they are purchasing their own or whether you're buying it for you. At my school, we purchase all of the fabric for the students, so I go to Joann's, Walmart, I order some online, and I'm constantly looking for new fabrics, new and different things, taking requests from students, that type of thing, to bring in more fabric. So because of that, I keep all the scraps. So anytime we're working on a project, students have scraps, they're going to be storing them, and I'll kind of show you how that all works. Used to be, this tub right here had just all the scraps dumped in there together, no rhyme or reason, and anytime we needed to use scraps for a project, kids would just dig through it, and it was a really big mess. And thanks to my wonderful student teacher last school year, she and I worked together to create this new system, which is not perfect, but it is very helpful. So now each of these containers has a label on the side of the container. This says yellows and oranges, and it also has a label on the lid. These are just a shoebox size container. You open it up, and inside there you've got your yellows and oranges. Okay, so these are all just scrap pieces, and then those go down inside of the original box that we used to keep all the scraps loose in. So I still use this big box for storage of scraps, but now they're organized by color. So the way we've done this here is we have a blue container, black, purple, green, pink, a blue-green, because I tend to have a lot of blue-green, red, a box that has white background, so like you can see through the box here, there's some Angry Birds, but the background of the fabric is white, and then some browns and other neutrals. Okay, so that is how I have done the storage of my scraps, but there is a process that goes into getting them organized in this way. On days that we are going to be cutting out a pattern, I will give instructions to my students, sometimes in the video that I make for them, and other times just out loud in class, of what to do with their scraps. And so we had cut out some pajama shorts. I had instructed that like smaller pieces go in this tub, and then larger pieces go in to this tub. They're supposed to cut off any like tails and stuff like this, but as you see, you know, students are students, they don't always go by our instructions. If I caught that though while it was happening, I would just send it back to the student and say, hey, you need to go cut those tails off. Basically what I like them to do is give me rectangles. So they would chop this end off, and they would keep their fold down here, and then they would cut this one. So they're just basically cutting into rectangular pieces, and it makes it easier for me to visualize where they need to be stored. Okay, so usually what I would have would be a tub that has bigger pieces and one that has smaller pieces. Then I can start looking through the smaller pieces and see where they might need to go next. So this gets a little bit narrow, but it's got some notches cut into it, but it's still a pretty good piece. I would fold this up just a few times just to make it a little smaller. And then you have to decide, where does it go? Okay, so I would either put this with the grays or the blue-greens. I'm probably going to put this one with the blue-greens just because someone who's looking for blue-green fabric might like that. And I say I often use this type of a job for helpers in my classroom, for kids who are done with everything. Sometimes A+ tutors, that's not what they're supposed to be doing, but if they are not tutoring a student, it's always a good thing for them to be able to help. So they would just fold these up and put them in one of those boxes that I mentioned earlier. So if they're looking for the blue-green one, they're gonna look on the side, pop the lid off, and just make sure it fits down in there, okay? So that is what I do with my smaller scraps. Now these larger ones that are in here, these take a little bit more time. Like I said, I'm gonna get them into rectangular shapes, and then I have some other tubs of fabric that I use for storing those, and I'll show you that next. Well, these are not all of the tubs that I have. I have a lot more in my back supply room, but I just thought it would be easier to go through them right here to show you what I do. First of all, I label everything, and what I used to do is I used to have a big tub like one of these for each project that I did. So I would have like 1 yard pieces for aprons, and I would have certain cut pieces for pillows, like 1.5 yard for a certain project we would do. But I found that I was not using up some of my fabric, that it was staying, and I was just keeping it in this box. Every year we do the project and that fabric would stay there. And so I spent some time at the end of last school year and reorganized things. And so far, I really like how everything is working out. So I do have specific project labels on some of these things. What I've done with this one, says it's a 5-inch wide strip. So I often have students use these for extra projects like scrunchies, but these are really good for the quilted bag that we make. So I have a quilted bag label on it. That doesn't just mean it has every single thing for the quilted bag in it, but those are 5-inch wide. That's what we use for that project. So those are in there. So let's say I had a big scrap like I was showing you in that tub, pretty good size, but it's maybe only like 6 or 7 inches wide. I could go ahead and cut 2 inches off to make a 5-inch wide strip, and then I could store it in there. If it's about 8 inches or less, but maybe it wouldn't work for this 5-inch. Maybe it's not the full length of the bolt. Maybe I would put it in this 8 inches or wide or less wide scraps. I've got another one for 9 inches. If I've got a really big scrap, then I'm going to put it in the box that says less than 1 yard, but still large pieces. And then in the middle here, I've got a 1 yard piece box, over 1 yard, and then in the back, I haven't brought it out, but it's got like 2+ yards. Okay, so those are my really big pieces. I also do have, not scraps, but I do purchase fabrics by the bolt, and I will just keep them on the bolt until we use them. Okay, so all of that is my yardage of fabric, just the quilting cotton. I have my other like stretch knits and stuff in another area. Okay. So how I work with this, let's say like a student today was doing an envelope pillow, they were making the backing of it. They could choose through any of these 3 boxes to find their fabric. So let's say I did have one student use this. She brought it up to me at the cutting table. I cut off the strip that she needed. Then as I'm doing it, I'm measuring with my cutting mat to kind of visualize how much she has left. And I could tell this was over 1.5 yards. So I told her, as she's going to put it up, go put that back in the over 1.5 yard piece. Same note, I had a student using a Christmas fabric. It may have been this one. Anyway, when she was using this, it started out as a 1 yard piece. But then when I cut the end off for her, it was smaller or less than 1 yard. So as I'm handing it back to her, it's still a good size piece. I wouldn't consider it really a scrap, so I told her to put it in the less than 1 yard box. So you just kind of have to keep up with it as you go. And every now and then I'll take time to go through it and organize just to make sure that everything doesn't get out of control. It doesn't take long. If you don't stay on top of this, this system will not work. So that would be something to think about, is how much effort do you want to put in to keeping it organized. If that is not something that you care about, if you just want, like I talked about at the beginning, if you just want that big tub just mashed full of scrap fabric where kids have to dig through it, then do that. If you have a different idea, maybe you can hang things. I've seen people wrap fabric around cards and use file cabinets or file drawers. Anything that works for you. I mean, this is just one suggestion or one way of doing it. And for me, it is kind of an everyday ongoing process of just doing a little bit each day to keep it organized rather than having to spend tons of time to get it organized. I just try to keep it organized the best that I can. I'll show you one other quick thing. So if I have a really thin scrap, like some of these are really thin because we have been working on some string pillows. And so I've got this really thin scrap. I don't even know what I'm gonna do with this yet, but so I have this other box. This is kind of my random stuff that we don't really know what to do with yet. I will have an A+ tutor sort through this. Now these 2 pieces have been sewn together, but we can keep those. So I'd probably rip those apart, put this in with the yellows, put that in with the navy. And there's some other things in here that are definitely usable, but that for whatever reason haven't been put into a container. They just go into this pile and we just kind of go through it over time. So I hope that helped. I hope you're able to get all your fabric organized. And if you have a great idea of organization or storage for the sewing lab, please share. Thank you.